So welcome back. This is the second video of my corset series. I now know that it will be 3, but more on that later. So yeah, based on the experience I made with the mock-up, I was now able to right jump in with the process of the real making. You can see here the finished product. So let's see how I made it. First, I placed all the pattern pieces according to the diagram shown in the book Corsets and Crinolines by Nora Waugh, so that the grain line follows the wished direction. And when I cut all the pattern pieces, I included 1.5 cm seam allowance and marked the outlines. So now I've cut out all the pieces I need. For each one are 4 pattern pieces, 2 of the blue one, 2 of the black one. The black one is the lining and the blue one is the front fabric. Then I harvested the front closure from my mock-up in order to put it into the final product so I wouldn't waste it. The front closure was set in really easily because I have done it once before. Those of you who follow me on Instagram might know that I entered the corset to the Foundations Revealed competition this year, and the entries are up now, so you can go and have a look on all those entries, and I really recommend it because there are so many wonderful entries, and if you're into it, just have a look there. I will put the link down below. And part of the competition was to base the entry onto a story, and my story is the tale of the Snow Queen. So if you wondered why I chose those colors, those blue and black and white, it's based on the Snow Queen, and I imagined her on her throne on the frozen lake, the blue frozen lake and the white snow all around it. Do you remember one of the things I learned while making the mock-up? This time I really pasted every seam into place, and none of the seams I had to open again, so even if I spent more time with basting, I spent less with ripping off some seams. placed the basting directly on the lines I had marked in the previous step, but I sewed a couple millimeters inside of the seam. This way it was easier to take out the basting thread, and I thought that it won't be bad if the corset is a little bit smaller than the mock-up was. Another thing that proved to be a really good idea is to trim the inner seam allowance. Since I at one place at the side seams I forgot it, and it was extremely visible. Luckily I realized it before sewing it all together and I was able to cut it, but it made a big difference. I didn't expected this. I also sewed a top stitch next to every seam. I couldn't find any reference if that was in the original pattern too, but since I had some troubles with my sewing machine and I was afraid that the seams might not withstand the tension while wearing it, I figured that it wouldn't be a bad idea. So I've just sewn together the gussets for the hip, and other than the rest of the corset I didn't sew together the 4 layers, because then it's impossible to sew them into the corset. Now I will stitch the second line here, the top stitch here, and then sew them into the corset. The hip pieces were definitely the most tricky part to sew in due to the great curve, but after a short fight with all the fabric I also managed to sew them in. Maybe next time I sew in the busk at the legs, so I have more flexibility in the whole garment. Then I trimmed the upper and lower edge of the corset. I don't know why I had those irregularities, but it was the same with the mock-up, so I think it was something with the pattern. And since I started with the front, I now had to close the back. First I ironed the seam allowance into the inside, always being cautious to make the back side slightly shorter than the blue side, and so it wouldn't peek out. And then I closed the whole thing with a top stitch. The image of the corset indicated that there are boning channels at each side of the grommets, so I sewed one bone between the 2 layers directly next to the edge of the back. I found a mistake. I forgot to insert a waistband. I have it, I bought it here, and I wanted to insert it between the 2 layers, the blue one and the black one, and I forgot it. So yes, I think I will now place it where it has to be, and then on the front side I will add the boning channels, and then with the boning channels this one will be sewed in place or stitched in place to be fastened. Do you say it fastened? That sounds crazy. It annoys me a little bit, but I will have to deal with it now. But for the rest, I'm really happy how this looks like. And yeah, it's a little bit, you can't see it really, but it really makes this beautiful shape, especially here. And I have to make the eyelets. I don't like eyelets, but it's something I can learn now, so I will do that at next. No, I guess I will first make the boning channels. Yeah, that's the next step. So I tried to pin the waistband into place as straight as possible, but due to the curve this turned out to be an almost impossible task, and I cut out my failures in order not to bore you to death. The next step was to cut out the fabric for the boning channels. I wanted them to be on the bias, since I realized with the mock-up I had some tension in the fabric. There I did not cut the boning channels on the bias, so I think that was the reason why. And I should have marked all the stripes on the fabric and cut them out. I did it a little bit different. I measured every single stripe, then marked it and sewed it and then cut it out. I did it for I think 5 or 6 stripes and then started cutting the stripes before I sewed them. I ironed the seam allowance of the boning channels open so that they are placed on the back, and this wouldn't be seen later because they are between the corset and the boning channel. Despite the fact that I had once sewed the boning channels onto the mock-up, it took quite a while to place the channels on their assigned place, but still I'm happy that I made the mock-up, because I already had learned that one boning channel under the arm is placed a little bit different than I thought it would due to the sketch of it, and the final placement is when a corset is worn really, I can show you here. It's on the body it's a little bit more vertical and it's not following the lines of the underlaying sewing structure. So that's something I learned in the mock-up, because there I sewed it in almost like this piece here, and when I wear it on the mannequin it doesn't work that well. It's almost vertical underneath my arm. So yeah, that's something I learned during the mock-up process. So now I've pinned all the boning channels into place. I'm right now not that happy with how it looks, because I feel like it's just pinned onto it. It looks pinned on and well, it is. So I hope when sewn on it looks better. So things I've realized. One is I have to add the suspender first, I think. So I have to sew them together, and I think I will sew them on the back side and then the boning channels over it. I have to look, see if that works. And then with the waistband, which I forgot, I will now sew it on like that, and then the sewing lines of the boning channel will go over it. I hope that works. Yeah. So I really hope that it looks somewhat less pinned on when it's sewn. Then the hours passed sewing on all those boning channels. Almost every channel was sewn into place with 3 stop stitch lines, 1 in the middle and 2 on the outer sides. And of course for the broader one there were more seams, and for the smaller one with only 1 boning inside there were just 2 seams. And at some parts the illustration of the original showed that the boning channels overlap each other. As you can see here, this is one of these points, here is one, and at the back there are multiple points where this overlapping is. So I figured which one is the undermost layer, put them on, sewed them on, and then added the next layer on top of that. Luckily, somewhere during the process I remember checking the back and the waist tape, and I had unfortunately sewn it into a big wrinkle, so I had to rip off those seams I already had made and now sew it on without any wrinkles. There's one thing that really annoys me, and that's this. I didn't show it before because I was too annoyed. My sewing machine has some trouble sewing this all, so there are sometimes points where she doesn't sew correctly. She's just missing out some stitches. And sometimes I can change it with altering the tension of the thread. Then it works for a couple of sewing lines, like here, and then the next it doesn't work again. So I have this here, I've sewn 3 times, I guess, and you still see it. So sometimes I completely reopened it and sew it again. Sometimes I just sew a part of it, but you still see it. I can't fix it, so I went on and finished the whole thing, but it's something I don't like, and I hope for the next project I will find a way to deal better with it. I think it will hold, it won't be break, because yeah, I really tore at it and it didn't break, so I think it won't. But something I don't like. We will see how I can fix this in the future. Due to that, I also had to cut a million threads just because I started and stopped to sew so often. And a great point on my wish list is now a sewing machine that can handle natural fibers. And maybe one day I will own an old machine that can do that. Now once that the threads were all cut off, I started to pin on the binding at the bottom of the corset. It was just a stripe of the black fabric again, and this one was also cut on the bias. And I made the outer seam line with the machine, then folded it over and hemmed the back onto the corset over the first sewing line, so this one wouldn't be visible anymore. So I almost forgot the tiny straps for the suspender. They should sit here. At least the reference picture shows it like that. There they end somewhere here, but I can't sew it on here anymore. So I think I will place it here that it ends with that sewing line. I still don't know how to pronounce sewing line. I still have to look it up. And I think I will now pin it on this side and sew it on at the same line as I did with the bias tape here. And I have somewhat to figure out. No, that's wrong. It's like this, and then I think that's like so. Yeah, I think I have to sew it on like this, put over the tape, and then sew it down like this, or just fold it down, I think. So this way the seam allowance would be covered. Yeah, I will do that now. So I've spent the whole last night to sew on the binding and inserting the bonings. It took quite a while because I had to smooth out the edges of all those bonings, and I forgot that this boning channels can't be inserted from the top, so I had to reopen the binding here. I have to re-sew it in, and this happened here and somewhere here too. So I have to sew that back in, and then I will make the same at the top because now all the boning is inside. And then my most feared step ever was to set in the grommets, but funnily enough it wasn't that terrible as I thought. First I had counted the number of grommets of the original. I think there were 21. I decided to go with less, only with 16, because the space between all those grommets was so small with 21, so I decided I will go with 16. First I marked the distance between all the grommets, then punched the holes with an awl, and lastly I knuckled the grommets into place. And then I was really keen to finally fit the corset, so I laced it, and I think I laced it 3 times again because I couldn't wrap my head around how to lace it correctly. Now I have one with the long straps in the middle of the corset, so on the waistline. This is the very first fitting and I was so excited. I was so excited to get to this point. And when I inserted the last grommets, I really started to get afraid that it won't fit, but it fits. And honestly, I thought it would be a little bit higher here, but I think that's quite normal for this kind of corset. It constrains a little bit, but I think that's because I'm not used to it. The point where the most tension is this here, at the waistline here. But I think that's supposed to be the most tight point. I think this is strange. But I think there's a little bit of lace here. It possibly will be okay. So now onto the lace and the flossing. So I have made some tests how I want to make the flossing. This is on the mock-up of the corset, and here's one. Oh yeah. I settled with this one. First I thought I would do this little star above, but I don't think I have enough space for it. And here it's less, it's kind of boring I think, so I go with this one like this, a little bit elongated. So to finish the corset and to make it at least wearable even without the lace, I made the flossing on all the boning channels, and it was a quite meditative process, so enjoy some of the work. And finally, I tried the corset on with the appropriate undergarment. The next step is to make the lace for the upper part here. That will take a lot of time, so this will be another video. And yeah, so if you enjoyed it, please leave a like or subscribe if you want to know how this project goes on. So have a great time, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!